Hello, my friends. I hope you have a good Saturday and a great weekend. I've got a conversation with Christian Finnegan for you, as I often am trying to here, dropping on the weekends. Many of you have reached out and said you love it. So Christian and I recap the week's headlines, both serious and ridiculous. We talk a little bit about the holidays. We go off on a tangent where both of our fathers got uncomfortable in certain situations at performances. We talk about the Middle East, Elon Musk, George Santos, and more, and I hope that you like it. Christian, of course, is a hilarious stand-up comedian who you can see performing in New York City and around the country and online, because he has 5 comedy specials and albums, and we absolutely love laughing along with Christian Finnegan. And of course, his newsletter on Substack. That's how we can support him, and that would be a big deal if you haven't subscribed yet to newmusicforolds.substack.com, because you don't have time to discover new music, but he does. And every week, and if you're a paid subscriber, bi-weekly, a new edition of New Music for Olds includes all kinds of great new suggestions. All right, so check him out, of course, on social media. He's active on all of the platforms. All the links to that in the show notes, as they are to every guest. All right, well, how about that? That's a good intro, right? Let's do it, shall we? I'm always going to ask you to support my work with a paid subscription to patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Cannot do it without you. Thank you to the many of you who have signed up this week. That's amazing. Really made the week awesome for me. And nothing's better than ending my week talking with Christian Finnegan. So, hey, let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, Christian Finnegan is back.
Where?
What?
Oh, here he is.
There he is. He's here. Oh. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, there he is. Well,
yeah.
There he is.
That's always been your thing to launch into.
Yep.
Yeah.
That song, There It Is, by Tag Team, for those of you who are pop rap historians. I remember once at the when I was in college, when that song was popular, there was a gathering outside of the 4th Street Tower Records in Manhattan, and it was like there was a white guy with like a really high ponytail, and there were camera crews, and there were like a bunch of black teenagers. And I remember him clearly they were shooting something for Tag Team, and he's like, "Okay, party people, I would like to get a whoop, there it is started."
I love that when people, even if they're well-meaning, they just don't know how white they sound or how uncomfortable. Like even remember that Mitt Romney, when he was he had a photo op with a bunch of young black kids when he was running for president, and they were all behind him. He did "Who Let the Dogs Out" with all these black kids, like just kind of laughed and cringed, like they weren't offended by it, but we all watched and we're like, what is happening? I love those moments.
Yeah. My feeling is just, if it doesn't feel natural, if you wouldn't say it to your friends, don't say it to people you don't know.
Right,
Do you know what I mean? Like just if it doesn't feel natural coming off the tongue, it's not going to sound natural.
But like, I also feel like there's an excuse that I think, I'll speak for people of color here. Like, I think a lot of white folks, either they don't have many people of color in their life or haven't, and there's a kind of a lacking of self-awareness, which brings me to an example like what we're hearing from this anti-trans activist Riley Gaines, and like we've heard
nice segue.
Thank you. Like from Megyn Kelly. Remember, she said Santa's not black, and now Riley Gaines is talking about, we've gone too far with the political correctness with a gay nutcracker or these. And what I mean by that, like, people don't even realize how that sounds. White people, when they're saying things like that Santa can't be black, even if you don't think it's like a terrible thing to say, like the fact that that's a thing you would say is bizarre to me. Because I feel like I've spent time around at the barbecue.
Yeah, well, and it's also like, on whose behalf are you enforcing this code? You know what I mean? Like, is there some canon written somewhere that, like, is there someone keeping score? Are you worried about losing Santa Claus to people with wheelchairs? Is that really a heavy concern of yours? Because I just, if it doesn't appeal to you, don't buy it. Like, who cares? Like, if you don't want to go see a gay nutcracker, I don't think anyone is proposing that you should legally be mandated to watch the gay nutcracker.
Well, isn't the? I mean, my daughters were in the Nutcracker every year for years. Isn't the Nutcracker a gay show? Have you ever? I think straight Nutcracker would be.
Yeah, show me the straight Nutcracker. Yeah, it's basically just a bunch of toys come alive on Christmas Eve, and they all watch the Raiders Jets game.
You know, the funniest. As soon as you said gay Nutcracker, my dad, we would go see my daughter's recitals, and my dad's not like super comfortable with certain things. I hope he hears this because he knows, he remembers it. So they had one of the male ballet dancers. If you've ever seen ballet, the male dancers wear something called a dance belt. Anyway, it looked like a codpiece. Like it looked like a huge dick. And it was very kind of out there. It was a little probably too much, and his pants were really tight, and you could see his ass crack. And anyway, there it is. My kids are in it. It's a semi-pro production, to be fair. But you hear my dad says to me, leans in and goes, oh, it's a little too much. Like, that's what he said to me. Like, he was uncomfortable with it. And I just think it's so damn funny. He's like, all right. Okay.
Yeah, I took my dad to see Sleep No More once, which for people don't know is this... I guess you'd call it a theatrical production that's been going on for years here in New York City. It's really amazing. It's like this four-floor building that you can wander through at your own pace and investigate all these rooms. It's like an immersive theater experience, and there's dance involved, and there's scenes going on, and like you can go into a room and like start opening drawers of desks and find all sorts of cool stuff. It's really an amazing piece, but it's based on Macbeth and the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Anyway. There's some nudity in it, and afterwards, it's a really intense theatrical experience. And afterwards, as I walked out with my dad, and I was really curious to hear what he had to say, the first thing he says, "Did you see the size of that black guy's cock?"
Yeah,
like that was his main takeaway from this.
You guys have different levels of sophistication, but that I'm sure yours. I'm sure you have him to thank for yours. But I think you might have heard this, but you're going to love this 20-seconder. Story. Forgive listeners if they've heard it before. I took my parents to see a Broadway show when I first moved to New York. It was an acting school. They took me, I should say, probably got tickets to whatever was available. Indiscretions. Kathleen Turner and a young Jude Law. And in the show, in the first act, Jude Law gets out of the bathtub full frontal naked. I'm sure most people in the theater knew it because they knew about the show. We didn't. We weren't expecting it. My dad left at intermission, didn't come back. He didn't love that.
Wow.
He didn't tell us that's why. He certainly wasn't like saying anything. He just didn't like, he's like, wasn't for me. I go, where did you go? And I'm now at the Comedy Club at Stand Up New York, and my Ted Alexandro was there. And I'm telling Ted, I go, yeah, we just saw Indiscretions. Jude Law got out of the bathtub naked, and my dad left. And Ted goes to my dad, where did you go, Mr. Dominic? And my dad goes, I just went to get a hot dog. And Ted goes, a hot dog? One of my favorite memories in comedy.
Aging Dr. Freud.
Sorry, Dad. I don't think that you wanted to suck Jude Law's dick, but maybe. I mean, who doesn't? Anyway,
he wanted to devour it.
Have you seen him? Jesus. So let me ask you then about, let's have a fun, I want to get your take on the holidays. Like, are you have we taught this? Maybe we have last year.
We probably have at this point. We must have.
Yeah. Like, how do you feel this time of year? Do you get into it? Do you do decorating? Do you like it? Are you happy? Do you do things?
I don't do any of it. Right. And I feel bad because I know that that's not true. We do some of it. We have this little, as I've said a gazillion times, we have this little cabin upstate, and we do a little decorating up there. It's a very wintry feeling house anyway, but we have some garland that we put up, and we put some water and spices in a kettle and put it on top of the wood stove, and it makes a nice Christmassy type smell. And but if I was being honest, like left to my own devices, I probably would do zip. But
there's a difference between like what you actively do and what you enjoy.
That's true. That's true.
That's my question. Do you enjoy being around it all, and what do you enjoy?
I enjoy being around it for about 2 weeks. I don't really. I do like the city at the post Thanksgiving when the Christmas music is playing like through the speakers along the main drag, and that's nice. The problem though is that I know what's coming behind it which is always a mitigating because I hate January, February, March like with such a passion that it's like knowing what that is a harbinger of is always a bit of a drag. I love snow until December 26th, and then I never want to see it again.
Man.
You know, and so it's like
we don't even get
part
snow.
Of it is a drag.
Now, I'm a skier, so I can't wait for it, and I want it to stay around as long as possible, you know?
Yeah, I loathe it with a passion.
Well, you are, of course, the purveyor of newmusicforolds.substack.com. Will there be a holiday newsletter, or how do you feel about holiday music? Do you then turn that on?
If I'm going to put on holiday music, I remember last year I did a playlist of, I like holiday soul music. Because I don't like contemporary like rock Christmas music. Like that always just seems silly to me. And traditional Christmas carols, I have all sorts of childhood feelings about or attachments to. And so I don't, but to me, like putting on like Merry Christmas Baby or, you know, the Phil Spector Christmas album or something like that, that to me feels very festive, but I have no personal biographical connection to it, and so it feels clean in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, it's so that is what I prefer to listen to around the holidays is sort of holiday soul music.
And you don't do anything different in terms of drinks or anything else? Like, do you drink tea?
I mean, I don't drink anymore. So
a hot tea. Do you have hot drinks?
We have, well, at QED we have, the hot apple cider, which is a big
right. We talked about that. Yeah,
which is delish. Yeah, I like about half a cup of hot apple cider. It starts to get a bit much for me. Yeah. I like a good hot cocoa on occasion.
I'm childish,
but yeah, little whipped cream in there.
Oh, you're like a little boy.
Mm-hmm. Marshmallows, if you got them.
Yeah. Wow, you're getting smaller.
Beyond that, I don't know. I'm not great when it comes to holidays.
Okay.
I will admit, like my wife and I, like we get presents for each other, but every year my wife is like, "We're not doing presents this year, are we?" I'm like, "Well, I already bought something, so I guess you're not doing presents."
All right. Well, let me ask you about some of the things that happened this week. I certainly want to always get your take on your framing of things. So I love talking to you at the end of the week and looking back at a few things. How did you react to the other night with Elon Musk and his overt anti-Semitism? Especially, it's interesting because we've seen this from him before, but not post October 7th. We haven't, and so it does seem when hate crimes against Muslims and Jewish people are skyrocketing all over the world. And then one of the most famous influencers in the world says something so overtly, it seems so much worse. What are your thoughts, or how did you feel or pay attention to that? And if anything's going to drive us off of Twitter, should that be it? I say no. I'm never leaving there. I love Twitter still. I love Twitter, and I stand on principle on plenty of things, mainly that I pay for. But even then, like, what am I, not paying for YouTube TV because Google, so anyway, your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does suck that he bought the restaurant the bar that we all love to go to. Do you know what I mean? But it's like,
yeah,
that bar is still that bar just because, I mean, it's
now
shittier
it's a Nazi bar.
They do play, Tomorrow Belongs to Me and other sort of Nazi favorites over the jukebox. Yeah, the jukebox has changed, but it's the same bar. And so, I mean, I will say that I don't enjoy Twitter to the same degree that I used to. I mean, in addition to like the number of just changes that have made it, obviously the way that blue check marks replies get put up to the top and things like that. It's a far less enjoyable experience now. I'm still slightly stuck on it, especially because like I'm a big Knicks fan. And so I have a nice list of Knicks related tweeters that I sort of, check in with.
Yeah.
I keep wanting to leave. I have taken it off of my phone screen.
Right. You said
like
that,
the app is still on my phone, but I have to search for it. Like it's not just an icon I can just click. And that has helped slightly because sometimes you just mindlessly just pick up your phone and you want to check some date on your calendar. You're like, well, I'll just go on Twitter for 30 seconds. And then 20 minutes later, you've realized you just flushed that time down the toilet. And so I have mitigated it
right.
slightly. I mean, I don't know what to think about it because we're all just living in such different realities now. It's like there's there's no monoculture anymore. And so it's like, to me, it feels very clear that this dude is, you know, a racist and just a moron in many ways. But people are living in a different reality. In one way that makes me feel like there's certain people you're never going to reach because that's just their sphere of information. But it also makes me feel that it is slightly siloed, that there's a large chunk of people out there who have made up their mind about Elon Musk, either for or against. And so I don't see, like, Elon Musk is not going to convince me of any anti-Semitic conspiracy theories because I had already written the book on that dude. You know, like, I've already made my judgment on Elon Musk. And so I do wonder how toxic is it if he's only talking to the same people that already buy into him. Like, there's a large number of people who have already decided they don't like that dude, and they're not going to be necessarily as affected by his, you know, propaganda or whatever, you know, but then you're talking about the more tactile problems, which is just, you know, I was listening to, I think it was Chris Hayes last night, or, you know, somebody was talking about that he's kind of made himself almost too big to fail, in the sense that so much of the future is tied up in his companies. You know, that if you're talking about satellites, you know, you're going to have to deal with his Skylink, you know, and if you're talking about electric cars, well, Tesla is, even if other car companies bite into that market share, he's still going to be at the table when those conversations take place. And so, you know, that's a little
space
daunting.
Exploration, SpaceX is different than Starlink. And then you've also got, obviously, Twitter. So that's a great, he's too big to fail. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah. And so I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I at a certain point, though, it's like the government has to start to extricate themselves from this dude.
Well, they removed him like from the organization board that sponsored Biden Xi's meeting, APEC. I think that's what I read. Like, he's getting removed from boards and seemingly some, you know, people have argued he should no longer be getting government contracts. But I think that's like,
yeah, that would be the next step.
But you can't do that. But yeah. I don't know much, but my argument there would be like, you have to give him the government contract for Starlink. There's only one Starlink, and it's really useful for a lot of reasons, for people living in rural areas and the wars and all of the stuff. But
well, and that's the thing, is that it all then becomes a long slog, because the answer is to then, all right, well, we have to come up with competition for Starlink, and if he makes that difficult, well, then you need to wage antitrust actions against, you know,
Yep.
You know, because I'm sure he will try to make it so that he can't have competition. You know, he's going to try to corner these markets, and the government has to sort of potentially, in almost an activist sense, try to counteract that and to not let it happen. Like, you can't let one person, and I don't care who they are and whether I agree with them or not, you cannot let one person wield that sort of, you know, power. You just can't. One citizen cannot have that much control, and the government, you know, this is why the, you know, libertarians always talk about, that we want to get government regulation out, because you know what will happen is that we'll basically have a warlord society where we'll have 5 people who aren't necessarily government officials, but they basically function the same way, that they are sort of untouchable fiefdoms, and that they can't be touched by the government because they're just in control of areas, whether it's physical areas or areas of the market,
like
or
oligarchs,
whatever, you know?
like Russia.
Yeah. And so it, like, you know, the government needs to actively push in the other direction for sure. And now, what will that happen? You know, so many people love to privatize things because it's easier. It's like, just give it to the market. Let the market do it. You know?
What about, just along those lines, what is your perspective on the temperature of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and
I mean, we talked about this briefly last time we spoke about how, like, it devastates me from a purely selfish perspective. Like, it devastates me to see our coalition at each other's throats about this, and not even getting into the who's right, who's wrong, but it's just like, this is how autocratic societies develop. This is how fascists come to power, is when the non-fascists are too busy fighting each other and somebody comes in with a 35% plurality and can, take power because everybody else is too busy being at each other's throats. I mean, it really does scare me, as I think I was saying last time. It's like, there's no world where democracy survives when, like, American Muslims and American Jews are at each other's throats, generally speaking, or not even American Muslims, American Jews, but people who are inclined to support Palestine are at the throats of people who are, or at least liberals who are inclined to support Israel. Like, that's a real recipe for disaster. And so that worries me. I do think that, there's still time, that some of these emotions are incredibly raw right now. And I do hope that people will find their way back to a more reasonable, accommodation of people who don't agree with them. There's a comedy club owner who emailed my wife to let her know, or to tell her that a comic who does a show at QED had, quote unquote, sent her anti-Semitic messages. And now I don't know whether this is true or not. It's entirely possible. And I know the comic in question a little bit. And my suspicion is that she probably was saying some pro-Israel stuff, and he probably came back with some pro-Palestine stuff. And she is kind of leveraging that to hurt his career, because everybody's lost their fucking minds. And this is no longer I disagree with you. It's, I will do whatever I can to take you down. And that really bums me out. I mean, this is obviously a very micro situation, but it's like
perfect example.
It's happening all over with everybody. I mean, and especially the sort of team sports nature of social media now, where, I mean, if you want to say one thing about 10/7, it has been a boon to the personal branding industry. It's really, so much of the vitriol, I think, isn't even so much about trying to achieve a political aim. It's about advertising to the people who follow you how strident and, how biting your take can be.
It's interesting, too, because I think on other issues, I certainly would be that guy. I would be strident. I would be righteous. This is sexist or racist. I do absolutely feel strongly about my opinion here, and that will go further for my branding, for the conversation, for social media in every way, because it's a strong opinion, and that matters in the world of media and branding. But I wouldn't be doing it for that reason. It would be, I do have that opinion, and two things can be true, and it's going to be good for me. In this case, my true opinion is that of a lot of other people. I just talked to Michael Ian Block yesterday, and you and him and me, I think, pretty much share the same. Like, I'm not going to either march. I have a lot of sympathy for in different ways. I have a lot of opinions, but like, I'm not coming down so hard and burning someone down over here or over there. And that's not really going to help my branding. My opinion and thoughts are very nuanced. I'm very patient. I think I know my place on this one. And that's not great. That's not great for
it's not great for the growth of your brand.
Right.
No. And it sucks that those two things are in conflict. And it leads to bad outcomes, and it leads to a constant heightening of hostilities, because you'll say something that's maybe 10% more strident than you actually believe because it's a good zinger, and then someone will respond in kind, and it's not, there's no goal to it. It's kind of like what people are saying about Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Lauren Boeberts and the Matt Gaetzes of the world. It's like, they don't care if the government shuts down, because they're not there to govern. They're there to acquire media power and sort of a cultural clout. And the actual job of government is, who gives a shit If anything, it helps them if government is a nightmare. They don't care. And that's sort of the way I feel about the way everybody is about this Israel-Hamas war. Is like, at the end of the day, it doesn't affect most of us on an actual tactile level what happens, but it can affect my ability to get more followers. If I can use that. And I don't think a lot of people are consciously thinking, I'm going to use the Israel-Hamas conflict to become famous. But I just think that the incentives are steered towards that, and people will lean into it whether they know it or not. They'll go a little harder than they would if it was somebody sitting in the room with them, which is always the case with social media. You're always going to go harder because you can't see the person you're insulting.
I do think everything you're saying is really interesting, and it makes me think, and I haven't had this thought, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. 10/7 happens in this current media landscape where you have TikTok and all of the rest of social media, not to mention cable news, versus 9/11 or some other terrorist attack, Pearl Harbor. And the difference in the reaction, because we don't have what you referred to as kind of a monoculture or one truth or one reality, like this thing happened, we saw it happen. I mean, even January 6th, there is different points of view that about what happened, which is crazy because we all saw it. But, and as Marjorie Taylor Greene said, you saw it where? On television? To Piers Morgan. He's like, yes. Well, that wasn't it. Yeah. I'm like, okay. But I just think that with this media landscape, you can have it any way you want to write it. Everybody's a screenwriter about who's to blame, and more importantly, like what happened, how many people died. And when you think about like 9/11, it's like, if that were now, what would we say about those buildings? I guess, I don't know, maybe, again, I haven't thought it through. There were certainly plenty of conspiracy theories. We writ large wouldn't say anything. Everyone would individually say their own thing in connection to what would advantage them the most. I mean, there is no we at this point. Do you know what I mean? There is no collective we. Yes. There's just my Substack and your Patreon.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't pretend to have the answer to that, but it's like, I think it would be helpful for us to acknowledge that. I remember in college reading this kind of famous media criticism book, Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. And it's kind of like a very super, and I should read it again. It's very short, but one of the things I remember him saying is like kind of taking into question the notion of unbiased news. And I'm paraphrasing wildly, but basically he says that news is always going to be biased depending on where you decide to aim your camera. And I always think of that it's like,
yes,
yeah, you can aim your camera over here and it's a story about a riot. You can aim your camera over here. It's a story about police brutality. You can aim your camera over here. It's a story about a kid getting an ice cream cone.
Yes.
Depending, and they're all quote unquote true. And I don't know how to deal with that, but I think we should all acknowledge that.
I love that. I've never really heard that, but I've definitely practiced that throughout my years at Sirius. And now in that, even if I did the most objective reporting on some financial story, I'm talking about that story. I have 3 hours. What stories and what guests am I picking? That's my editorial choice. And it's even if I was even more objective, I was in the Associated Press or something. What are the most important stories? For me, it's been what's most impactful on the most people's lives. That's generally where I tend to have my editorial. But the point is, it's still my bias because I'm the one talking about climate today with this person and not about the Middle East or economics with that person. That's me.
Exactly.
I chose that.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for listening, folks. Appreciate your...
Thanks for buying into the particular narrative that Pete and I are trying to craft.
Which is, just as we said, like in my opinion, what I've tried... and more and more I'm doing more personal. Like we all are dealing apparently with anxiety, depression. Let's talk about those things. That's a huge story. Let's editorialize about how to deal with suffering and find more joy. I choose a little bit more of that to talk about now because that's an impactful thing. I just want to do a live read for where I want to go.
Well, and when I also think a lot of the coverage of like lost planes and natural disasters and things like that. I mean, I think we can all agree like, okay, well, those are sort of immediate things that need to be addressed. But I also think that the news loves those things because it is sort of a refuge of this is the story. This is the thing we have to be talking about. We don't even have to make an editorial choice. There is this hurricane, and so we don't need to even.
Well, hurricane is in public interest. Lost plane, less so. But then the one that I struggle with, and a lot of experts have looked at this, is mass shooting and how much it gets covered. And now I think it's important to say it's always going to get, every news outlet is going to send a correspondent when there's a horrific shooting. They're going to report from there for a couple of days. That's not going to change. But I do think it makes things worse.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see how it could. I mean, it's weird how, and I don't want to say it's bad, or it is bad, but it's nobody's fault, is how tidy the cycle has become after a mass shooting. That it's like a Shiva. You know what I mean? That it's like, we will talk about this obsessively for a period of time and we'll get it out of our systems. And then a week from now, we'll move on to something else. I don't know how that could be changed. I mean, I think that's just the way it is.
Well, I think one thing is personal choice. You can't regulate it, but I'm not going to engage in that. I'm not.
I agree. I'm
not going to say the name of the shooter. I don't know why we don't have solidarity on that, but.
About not saying the name of the shooter?
Yeah, don't say his name.
I mean, the thing is, though, you're talking about a sieve of information. So the name of the shooter is going to be out there.
Yep.
Well, because then you also have to say, okay, well, what if the shooter had a bunch of very specific political literature and specific events in their past that help us prepare for the next shooter? Like a bunch
that's
of
important. No, I think that's important.
Trump. But at that point, then you're having to name the shooter, because I'm not just going to take the word. If the news if an anchor person comes on and says the shooter was inspired, we found a bunch of pro-Trump literature and followed Ben Shapiro and all that. And it's like, all right, well, I'm going to need a name to verify that. I'm not just going to shouldn't.
You're right. I shouldn't have come down so hard on that. First of all, don't tell me what I have to do. But second of all, I shouldn't have come down so hard on it. You make a lot of points, and those are all true. I think what I meant.
I'm saying that we're fucked either way.
No, we are. We absolutely are. I'm saying, you name the shooter, no doubt. Name the shooter, but don't every time we talk about the Charleston shooting, I don't say Dylan. I don't say his name.
Yes, of course.
Subsequently, because I don't want to keep it the Christ Church shooter famous. I also don't want to destroy the name of Charleston and Christ Church. They both seem like really nice towns.
Well, it also, though, one of the upsides of the spate of mass shootings is that it's impossible to keep them all straight at this point anyway.
Right, yeah,
so
yeah, but you know what I mean when I say the Vegas shooter. I bet.
Yeah, I think it'd be an interesting game to play. To give a name, and you have to guess: is this a mass shooter or a 19th century senator? Dylan Roof. I don't know. Was he a mass shooter or was he a 19th century senator? They all sound like they could have those names.
Often we throw in their middle names, right? When they're assassins.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if they assassinate a political leader. All right. And there was one other big story I wanted to ask you about this week. Are you paying any attention to Trump's trial stuff or any of the antics around that?
Some. It's. I don't know if you've been kind of up on what's going on in Florida right now, that apparently Eileen Cannon is pretty actively making it so that this trial is going to get delayed.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about
that the government had put in a motion that was denied yesterday, summarily being like, I'm not even going to address any of this until our first hearing, which is 2 months before the trial, which means that it's inevitably going to get pushed back. Now, you could say, well, the DC one is kind of the big kit and caboodle, and that's going to happen regardless of what this woman does. But, certainly it's not ideal. It really is bizarre to me. And I know that courts, the way our legal system works, they have their processes and whatnot, but how this case ended up on this woman's desk after she was thoroughly reprimanded by her behavior regarding the special master stuff, how we can just accept that, be like, well, luck of the draw, this is the way it is. And we now have to treat this person like they're acting in good faith. It's such an insult to everyone's intelligence to not acknowledge what's going on here. I don't know how to fix that.
Well, I haven't been paying as much attention that I'll probably talk to Glenn Kirshner or somebody specifically about all the cases next week and get updates on them. But in relation to
I'm going to go on a limb and say he knows a little bit more about it than I do.
No, I think you actually know more than him. So that's the documents case, and the similar case in Joe Biden's special prosecutor. Apparently, the investigation, they're not going to file any charges on his documents that he had in his garage, and of course that drove Trump outrage, and now we have to talk about the difference between the two, except for we don't really have to.
We don't.
So that's why I wanted to ask you finally about George Santos and the fact that he is apparently being expelled from Congress after the ethics report has come out, and apparently he spent money that was given to him for his campaign on things like OnlyFans, an OnlyFans account, and Botox, and it's ripe for comedy. And I just, without, you can make jokes or not about it, but it is a pretty big deal this week that motherfucker is getting his finally.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be curious to see. I think there should be a pool going on which reality show he will end up on first. Is it going to be Big Brother? Is it going to be Survivor or Dancing with the Stars? I actually think it'll be Big Brother. That would be my guess, is that I could totally see him being on one of those shows. And I hate to say it, I could see him being good TV.
Oh, he's great TV.
Yeah.
He's a train wreck. Yeah.
He's an absolute train wreck. And he has that rare mix of shamelessness and also incompetence, which is a beautiful. I mean, he became a United States representative. I haven't, so who's more competent? I don't know, but
you are, because you're not going to end up. You're not in trouble with the law. I mean, in the end, I would.
Hey, so is Nelson Mandela.
Same thing. You're right. I stand corrected. He's very much a reality show villain. And he'll do great. I mean, he has done great in that role. And
I could see him having, once he gets out of prison, which I'm sure at the end of the day, it'll end up being 14 months in a minor security prison or something like that. And in 2 years, he's going to come out and he'll put out some stupid book or a podcast or, but I don't think this will be the last that we've heard of George Santos. And if he's not in elected office, I'm actually not too bummed about it. I think he'd be a fun addition to the idiot sphere.
Love it. Thank you so much. I'll let you go. I love talking to you. I appreciate you doing this. People love when you join me here whenever, and especially on Saturday for some reason. They love having something to listen to, apparently. And so thank you very, very much, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, there he goes. How about it, everybody? Christian Finnegan. New music for olds.substack.com. Go subscribe. Go support our friend Christian right now. What are you waiting for? Thank you very much for supporting me. Can't thank you enough. And I hope that you have a great weekend. I hope to hear from you. You can always reach out, standupapete@gmail.com, or any of the other myriad of ways that one can contact another person these days. I see them. Someday I will see that message. But yeah, email's best. Okay, folks, love you. Have a great weekend. Thanks so much for your support. Be the change you want to see. Find joy in all the rest. John Carroll, take us away. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your
ground and then stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.